Today's topic is renewable energy. We will be analyzing where and why these renewable resources are useful to us in different situations. We'll also be talking about different types and we'll be describing how these actually work. You will turn your book landscape and you're going to split your page into 6, just as I have it on the slide. So turn your books in the landscape mode and split your page into 6.
Using this. So you're going to write the name of the renewable energy, then you're going to describe how it works, you're going to talk about the positive and negatives, and then you will create an energy transfer diagram. So I'll show you an example. So here's an example, wind power. Here's a picture, and you describe how it works. So it says in windy condition, the force of a wind turns a wind turbine, and this turbine is attached to a generator which produces electricity. The positives, you have it's renewable, so no harmful emissions. Negatives, only produces electricity in windy conditions, and it can be an eyesore. And here is an example of the energy transfer diagram for a wind turbine. So wind power uses a wind turbine to generate electricity from the wind. This turbine is connected to a generator which uses that energy and convert it into electrical energy, which we can use in our homes and in our factories. Now, one of the disadvantages of wind energy is that it can only produce a lot of electricity where there's a lot of wind. So you cannot use wind power where you have only a small amount of wind. And they're also very expensive to set up and maintain, and many people think that they're ugly and they can ruin the view of natural locations. So one of the things with wind power is that they tend to be very ugly, or they tend to be an eyesore, and so you'd not want to have wind turbines where you live because it can devalue the cost of your property, it will ruin the view, and some people are not interested in buying properties where they see wind turbines. Also, wind turbines can be affected by some natural disasters such as hurricanes, and you will have to buy a new wind turbine if that happens. And of course, they're not very reliable because it's not always windy. But a good thing, of course, about wind power, as with every other renewable energy, is that it will never run out. Wave power. Wave power has a wave generator that uses the motion of waves to turn a generator and produce electricity. This electricity is carried to shore in thick cables. So now, one of the things about wave power is that you will need lots of small wave power turbines located around the coast. So this is quite useful on small islands. But then one of the things with wave power, one of the disadvantages is that its initial costs are very high, but then there's no fuel cost, and then there's also minimal running cost. They're also fairly unreliable because the waves die out when the wind drops. The good thing about wave power is that there's no pollution, so that's quite good. Also, another disadvantage is that it can disturb the seabed and therefore disturb the habitat of marine animals. Hydroelectricity. Hydroelectric dam uses the principle of falling water to produce electricity. So you normally have a reservoir connected to, you have the turbine connected to a generator, and of course power cables. Now, as the water changes height, so there's a height difference, so it has gravitational potential energy converted to kinetic energy, and the turbine blades start to move. So the kinetic energy of the turbine blades is converted to electricity by a generator. Now, hydroelectricity is of course renewable, so there's no pollution, or there's very little pollution, and also produces a lot of electricity. However, some of the disadvantages include the fact that it's affected by weather conditions. So during drought, during period of drought, hydroelectricity will not produce a lot of electricity, and also it can affect the habitat of marine animals, so it will prevent. Tidal power. Tidal generators use tidal surges to generate electricity, and of course, tidal power use tides, which are produced by gravitational pull of the sun and moon. How they do this is that they create tidal barrages, which are big dams in rivers, and these big dams have turbines in them. So the tide comes in, fills it up, and the water is allowed to move at a controlled speed. So when the tide comes in, it moves at a controlled speed to fill it up. Now, as the tide is moving through, it causes the turbine blade to turn, which of course will cause a generator to produce electricity. Now, some of the advantages of tidal power is that there is no pollution and they're pretty reliable as well. Some of the disadvantages are the initial cost is moderately high. However, there are no fuel costs and there's minimal cost to maintain them. They can also prevent free access by boats and they can spoil the view. Solar power, we all know about solar power, uses energy from the sun. So it traps the sun energy and converts it into electricity. So solar energy has some solar cells, and those cells are what is used to trap the sun's energy and to convert it to electricity. One of the disadvantage though is that it uses a lot of cells, so we need a lot of cells to produce enough electricity. Of course, you cannot use solar power all the time because it requires time when it is sunny. Also, solar powers tend to be very expensive to install. It's very expensive to install, even though once you start it, then you can maintain it after that. And some governments will allow you to get loans to install these solar panel. And geothermal, as the word geo suggests, earth thermal heat. So geothermal power stations use radioactive rocks below the surface to generate electricity. Geothermal energy is used in certain places, such as places where you have volcanic areas, where you will get a lot of steam coming up from hot rocks. So geothermal, and of course it can also be used to heat buildings in addition to producing electricity.
The final thing you will do is you're going to create a paper chain. To do this paper chain, you will need your colored paper. So I have given you 10 questions. On one side of the colored paper, you're going to write the questions. On the opposite side, you will write the answers, and then you will link each piece of paper together to make a chain. So on one paper, you write one question on one side, the answer on the next side. On the next paper, you write one question on one side, the answer on the next side, and you link all of them together to form a chain.